Welcome to the Pioneer Podcast. I'm Matt Richards, and in this episode, Billy Kennedy and I finish up our conversation about the Apostolic. So sit back, enjoy the watch or the listen, and we'll see you on the other side. All right, welcome back to the Pioneer Podcast. Matt Richards here. Again, Billy Kennedy. Billy,
Hi.
It's good to have you.
Nice to be here.
So last episode, we were talking about apostolic leaders, not just in an apostolic role of leading all the churches, but apostolic roles for regions, certain cities, certain countries, whatever, where they're called to. So how do we honor them in the role that God has, or the position that God has placed them as an apostolic leader? And like, how do we honor them and follow them in the way that God has called us to?
Okay, so someone is called into leadership, and it becomes evident over time that they are apostolic in their gift and calling. The problem is the way our church is structured is we structure our church to have a pastor in charge.
Yeah.
The way that our finances operate is to pay the pastor. And so we gather the tithes, we pay the pastor to serve the people. That's how it is in probably most churches in the world.
Yeah.
But if someone is getting itchy feet in the sense of there's a broader call upon their lives into maybe either an evangelistic ministry or an apostolic ministry or a prophetic ministry, and there'll be calls upon their time, then there needs to be some really good conversations with that person as to what it is that God is calling them into.
Yeah.
So if I take my own example, so I was employed full-time by our church in Southampton. And then over time, it became evident that there was a broader call upon my own life for wider apostolic leadership. So we then had to have some conversations about my time and my responsibilities, and so we redefined my job description.
Yeah.
To make that clear, we looked at my financial package and recognized that really it was unfair on the church to fund all of that, and so we began to reduce the amount of funding I received from the church, and as other funding came in from outside of the church, then that supplemented it. So we had to then have some honest conversations around what my responsibilities were and what my financial package was from the church. So that they become the sort of delicate things that we need to then navigate. And so we got to a point now where I'm still funded by our local church, two days a week, to have that apostolic role across the nation and the nations. And so my job description, if you like, has been redefined to be responsible for international mission and for local city engagement within our local context, and then more broadly in my role as Pioneer International Leader. And so I find some funding from the Pioneer Network, and then other individual stuff that I do as well. Okay. So it's a practicalities often that create some of the tension, some of the challenges. So so that's a really important conversation to have. Yeah. I can't then maintain hands-on leadership in a local setting when most of my time is now spent functioning into different churches and internationally. Oh, yeah. So I think that this is some of the practicalities of what it means to be an apostle, and so how you function. And I suppose what I've done is I've sought to develop networks that are relational, not denominational.
Yeah.
So that being there's no central headquarters that dictates what the policy is on every matter, but we are a network of like-minded churches. We're family together. So we talked last time about apostles, mothers and fathers. Well, what they do is they build family. So that's how we want to operate. We want to be a family of churches called by God, um, with a clear mission, but maintaining the relational value that Pioneer
Yeah. Well, that I think
talks about.
that is the kingdom, though. Without mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, that's
Yeah,
we
yeah,
look throughout Scripture, and
yeah,
that is part of the kingdom of God.
yeah,
Is defining those roles as mothers and fathers into the kingdom, and and just as natural mothers and fathers, we have our sons
yeah,
and daughters. We raise them, like we talked about, doing that in the local church to raise up.
yeah,
Like in our church, we have one young man, and he's excellent at what he does. And I'm like, I can't do that job. I don't have the mind for that. But I will do anything I can to grow your gift in that.
yeah,
You're good at this. You're good at the organization. You're good at that numbers and in the things that I can't do. And I think in a lot of churches they don't grow the gifts of the people they see around them. It's because sometimes it takes away attention. And if we try to stifle a gift so we can stay in attention, then it puts us in an area of leadership that can be very toxic. And our job as mothers and fathers is to grow the gifts in the people around us and in our
yeah,
sons and daughters.
yeah. Exactly. So I operate now, you know, globally,
Yeah.
and so I just got some communication this morning from some friends in Pakistan who are now beginning to develop a pioneer network there,
Really.
and in Kenya, and I'm going down to Tanzania in October, and so what I'm finding is that people are hungry for that connection.
Yeah.
A lot of these churches may have begun as independent, but don't find that is long term fruitful.
Yeah.
And maybe it's they break away from something or they start afresh, but that independent isn't great. We are created for community.
Yeah.
So when I go into a place, into a nation, or I will gather those who are committed to growing together, committed to the vision, like the values that we talk about. And the first stage, really, of any network is to develop the foundation of relationship. So that's such a critical thing for me, is that we spend time investing in our relationships. So if that's a local church or if that's a national network, it's the same thing. And so I insist that we spend time, we meet together, we gather our leaders together, we get to know each other. It's not just all about business, but we get to know one another, and we develop that sense of community and love and honor and respect for one another. And so that takes time.
Yeah.
So I'm not particularly looking to grow quickly. I think slowly and steadily is the most important thing for me. And there was one guy contacted me and said, "Oh, Pastor, I can gather 200 leaders." I said, "Well, I'm not interested in that. Really, I'm not.
Give me 10 leaders that are willing to.
Exactly. So I think that is the starting point. We build a foundation of relationship. Then we add to that, and in the context of relationship, we start to recognize the grace gifts that God has placed upon the individuals in that community, in that family.
Yeah.
So we see who is graced apostolically. We see where the prophets are. We see who the pastors are. We see who the teachers are. We see who the evangelists are. And therefore, then we begin to recognize those grace gifts. But it's in the context of our relationship.
Yeah.
It's not people coming in with their ministries and their titles. And no, we begin to see the evidence of God's grace upon them. So there is that recognition of those grace gifts. And then this is why this sort of network or the mobility becomes important. That if I spend all my time in your church, after a while, we'll become lopsided.
Yeah.
We need a variety of gifts to keep the community healthy, and so therefore I think that's why the then the network provides room for apostolic gifts, for prophetic gifts to function and to flow and to operate. If you're a prophet and the only place you're prophesying is in your local church, after a while, you become
Old.
unbalanced.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Yeah.
so I think that therefore then it's a foundation of relationship, recognition of the gifting, then a releasing of that gifting across that network to see the fullness of the ministry of Christ operate and be fulfilled, and the individuals find fulfillment. So that's like, if like stage two.
Yeah.
Then we begin to develop resources within that environment for the equipping of people, for the raising up of leaders, and so that resourcing becomes the sort of next stage of development, and then fourthly, we then begin to strategize together. I think, and so often what happens is we start at 4 and try and work our way up, and that doesn't always isn't helpful.
Yeah.
We may have some short-term success, but if you want long-term sustainable fruitfulness, we have to operate the other way around. We by building the network through a foundation of relationship, identifying the gifts, developing our resources, and then beginning to see expansion.
Yeah.
So that takes time.
Yeah, I agree with you, because in our local church, we were, my wife is a very pastoral leader, but we were noticing we weren't able to take care of the people in the way that we should, and we said we need to bring other people in to help with that pastoral role, that caretaker role, and we brought people in, and we watched them for a couple years and said, it's time for you guys. We see this gift in you. We see this. Would you step up into a role of deacons and be pastoral to these people, and doing those visits and those phone calls and those moments that we may miss because we don't have the ability to do it, or we're too many people. We started to grow, and we said, okay, we can't take care of this all ourselves. But once we put that in place, we saw it grow even more. The church grew because we had more pastoral people in place to help take care of the local.
Yeah. So in some ways, it's the same principle in a local context to an apostolic network.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're operating with the same basis, which is we are building family.
Yeah.
And so whether you as a local leader or me as a national apostolic leader, we are seeking to build the same ethos within our networks. And your network is your congregation.
Yeah.
My network is a network of churches and congregations, and so it's the same principles. And I think that's where we don't need to move out of our relational mindset, but we maintain that mindset. We don't move into a business mindset. I mean, there's some business practices that are good that we need to embrace and take hold of, but we're not business-like. No. We are family-like.
Yeah.
And so that's how our networks develop. So we are developing this model in Australia and New Zealand, in Asia, across Sri Lanka, India, Nepal, Pakistan, in Africa, in South Africa, and Zambia, and Tanzania, and Kenya, and Uganda, and Sierra Leone, and Liberia, and Ghana.
Wow.
Across Europe, and up into Cuba, and with a few churches in the USA. So part of the purpose of this podcast is just to help some of that connection, isn't it, globally?
Yeah.
That we maintain a sense of family, and we're learning together as we go. And you're here in the States hosting, but talking to me in the UK, and others in the UK, and others in Africa, and others in Asia, and Australia, and so we're seeking to learn and grow together over these coming.
And when we make those connections, even if we're 5,000 miles away, it helps reinstate the values of the family mindset, of the kingdom mindset, of we're only going to be able to do this relationally.
Exactly.
So that's good. Billy, thank you. I appreciate that. That was a quick episode, but it was good and a lot of information in it. So, hey, thanks for joining us for this episode of the Pioneer Podcast. We hope it encouraged you. And if it did, share it with somebody. You can find out more about Pioneer in the description below, or you can go to pioneerpodcast.org and find the links there. We'll see you next time. God bless.